Put that case down, right now. If my sister stops breathing because of your procedure, you'll have to answer for it. She was only 9. But when a security manager tried to lock away a life support case at a desert medical hub, Luna Carter did the unthinkable. She took it back. And before anyone left that building, someone else was the one detained. But to understand how a 9-year-old ended up standing between a locked medical case and a system that didn't care, we need to go back 3 hours earlier, before the alarms, before the raised voices, before anyone started choosing sides. It began with a tired mother, 2 daughters, and a trip that was not allowed to fail. Rachel Carter hadn't slept properly in weeks. You could see it in the way her shoulders stayed slightly lifted, like she was bracing for impact even while standing still. In the way her fingers kept checking the strap of the medical case again and again, as if her hand was the only thing keeping the world from dropping it. Her oldest daughter, Maya, was 15. But illness has a way of stealing years from a face. The kind of illness that makes a teenager move carefully, like every step has a price. A portable biomedical support unit rested against her side, humming softly, its internal cooling system cycling on a strict timer. And then there was Luna, 9 years old, quiet, observant, the kind of child who didn't interrupt adults, but noticed everything they didn't say. They had driven through miles of desert to reach the Mojave Medical Hub, a transit center built to move critical patients from small regional facilities to advanced treatment teams. It looked less like a hospital and more like a checkpoint. Glass, steel, white floors so clean they reflected your face back at you. Everything there ran on systems, schedules, protocols. Clearances, especially the equipment. Maya's device wasn't just medical hardware, it was her clock. Every few hours, its internal temperature had to stay within a narrow range. Too warm, and the medication degraded. Too cold, and the system locked into what it called protective mode. Protective on paper, dangerous in reality. Once the device crossed that warning threshold, the software would automatically restrict access. No manual override without security authorization. No exceptions written into the code for fear, or for mothers, or for sisters standing 3 feet away. Rachel knew this. She had memorized the rules the way other people memorized prayers. That case could not be delayed, could not be stored, could not be mishandled. It had to move with them. They entered the waiting zone just after noon. It was quiet in the way government buildings are quiet, not peaceful, controlled. Digital signs glowed along the walls. Authorized personnel only. Zero tolerance for interference. Policy first. Those words were everywhere, big enough to read, cold enough to mean something else. Places like this did something subtle to people. They didn't need to raise their voices. The architecture did it for them. Rachel's voice dropped half an octave without her realizing. Her shoulders folded inward. She stood closer to her daughters, not because anyone had threatened them yet, but because places like this had a way of making you feel like you were already doing something wrong, just by existing in the wrong shoes, with the wrong paperwork, in the wrong tone of voice. Maya sat slowly in one of the metal chairs, the device resting at her feet like a fragile animal that couldn't be left alone. Luna stayed standing. She always did. She watched. She noticed the rhythm of the room, the way staff walked faster than families, the way security badges swung from certain necks and not others, the way some people were waved through with tired smiles while others were measured with a pause that felt heavier than it should have. That's when she saw it. 2 rows down, a man about her mother's age rolled in a similar medical case. Same size, same faint mechanical hum. Another patient followed behind him, laughing softly, supported by a nurse who kept saying, "You're doing great, take your time." No inspection, no delay, no clipboard raised like a shield. They passed straight through the secondary checkpoint. Luna didn't say anything. She just memorized it. Rachel, meanwhile, was counting, not out loud, in her head. Minutes until the next system cycle. Minutes until the internal temperature recalibrated. Minutes until warning turned into lock. She pretended to read the posters on the wall. She pretended not to watch the clock. She pretended she was calm. But every mother who has ever sat next to a machine keeping her child alive knows the truth. You don't relax. You negotiate with time. Maya closed her eyes. Her breathing was steady. For now. Luna shifted closer to her sister, placing her small hand over the edge of the case like it was something warm. Not because it needed comfort, but because people did. And in that waiting room, wrapped in white walls and polite silence, and rules printed larger than faces, Luna felt something she didn't yet have words for. That thin, heavy feeling that whispered, "You don't belong here. Not officially, not comfortably, not safely." No one had said it. No one needed to. Places built on procedure had a language of their own, and it spoke fluently in hesitation. Rachel lowered her voice even more when she asked a passing staff member how long clearance usually took. "Depends," the woman said, already walking away. No eye contact, no answer, just procedure. Luna watched her mother shrink by inches, not physically, internally. That's what these spaces did to people like them. They trained you to apologize before anyone accused you, to soften your tone before anyone hardened theirs, to carry your dignity like something fragile, something temporary, something that could be taken away if you stood wrong. But Luna didn't understand that rule. Not yet. All she understood was simple. Her sister needed that case. The machine had a clock inside it, and time, once lost, didn't negotiate. 3 hours before anyone would shout. 3 hours before anyone would record. 3 hours before a child would learn how loud a small voice could become when it stopped asking for permission to matter. And in that quiet room, under a sign that said "Policy First," Luna Carter learned something else too. That dignity doesn't arrive stamped by authority. It doesn't wait in line. It doesn't ask. It sits inside you, already whole. And one day, sooner than anyone in that room expected, she was going to prove it. When Diane Brooks walked into the waiting zone, the air changed. Not because she raised her voice, not because she rushed, but because she didn't need to. Power doesn't announce itself. It just arrives and expects everything else to adjust. Her shoes clicked softly against the floor. Her badge rested perfectly centered on her chest. Her eyes didn't scan the room. They measured it. She stopped in front of Rachel and didn't greet her. No hello, no "how can I help?" Just a pause, long enough to remind everyone who was allowed to decide what happened next. "Ma'am," she said, her tone neutral and clean, "I need you to hand over the biomedical case for additional inspection." Rachel felt her chest tighten, not from fear of the woman, but from fear of time. She nodded quickly and lifted the folder she had been holding since they arrived. Medical clearance, doctors' signatures, facility approvals, every paper she had collected like armor. "It's already cleared," Rachel said softly. "This is the authorization from our specialist team." Diane took the folder, flipped it open, and skimmed it like someone scanning a receipt. 3 seconds. 4. Then she closed it. "This isn't sufficient," she said. "Documents like these can be forged." The word landed heavy. Forged. Not incorrect, not incomplete. Forged. Rachel felt something inside her shrink, not because she was lying, but because she knew how quickly truth became irrelevant once doubt had been spoken out loud. "It's not forged," she said. "We've been cleared by—" "Ma'am," Diane interrupted, still calm, still polite. "This is a regulated medical transit hub. We can't take risks." Risk. She didn't say whose. Luna stood still beside her sister and watched everything. The way Diane's eyes moved differently over her mother's hands than they had over the badge on her own chest. The way the case was no longer medical equipment, but a suspicious object. The way her family had become a question mark. And then Luna saw it again. Across the room, a staff member was helping another patient with a similar case. Same size, same quiet hum. The nurse smiled and said, "You're all set. Take your time. Take your time." No pause, no doubt, no inspection. Luna didn't understand policies, but she understood patterns. Rachel hesitated. Her instinct was to argue, to point, to say, "You just let someone else through." But another instinct rose faster. The one that said, "Don't be difficult. Don't make them write something down. Don't become a problem." Because in places like this, being labeled uncooperative was worse than being wrong. "I can hand it over," Rachel said carefully, "but it can't be delayed. My daughter's device has a cycle." "We'll be as quick as protocol allows," Diane replied. Protocol. It sounded like protection. It felt like a war. Luna looked up at her mother and saw the struggle playing out in her eyes. Not between right and wrong, but between safety and survival. Between speaking and being allowed to stay. This was how systems worked. They didn't need to shout. They just needed to make silence feel safer than truth. Emily Hart appeared from the medical desk, her expression tight with concern. She leaned closer to Rachel and spoke quietly. "I know this is hard," she said, "but I don't have authority here. You have to go through security." Rachel nodded. Emily's voice held sympathy, but sympathy didn't unlock doors. "Is there anything you can do?" Rachel asked. Emily shook her head. "I'm sorry. I really am." That was the most painful part. Not cruelty, not anger. Just a system that worked perfectly while doing nothing. Diane extended her hand. "The case, please." Rachel closed her eyes for a second, not to think, but to surrender to the reality that refusal would only make things worse. She lifted the case slowly, feeling the vibration inside it, steady and fragile. Luna watched as it left her sister's side, watched the small gap form between safety and uncertainty. "Mom," she whispered. Rachel squeezed her hand. "It's okay. Stay calm." Because calm was the price of being allowed to remain human in places that treated fear like guilt. Diane took the case and turned away. No rush, no urgency, just procedure. Behind her, a digital screen flickered. Status: pending security clearance. Rachel swallowed. The countdown had begun. What hurt most wasn't the action. It was the implication. That Rachel wasn't trusted. That her paperwork wasn't enough. That her word meant less than someone else's convenience. This was how dignity was taken. Not with force. With suspicion. Luna clenched her fists. She didn't understand why the same case was safe in one person's hands and dangerous in another's. Why one family was told to take your time while another was told to wait. But she understood something simpler. Someone was lying, and it wasn't her mother. Emily stood frozen, caught between compassion and compliance. She wanted to help, but wanting didn't equal permission. That was another rule of the system. You could care deeply, as long as you didn't interfere. Rachel felt the weight of being watched, the weight of possibly being recorded, the weight of becoming a story someone else would tell about a difficult family. She lowered her voice even more. She folded her hands. She became smaller. Because in places ruled by protocol, survival meant shrinking. And somewhere inside Luna, something began to grow. A quiet anger. Not loud, not reckless, just certain. She watched Diane walk away with the case like it was nothing more than luggage, like it wasn't carrying her sister's chance to breathe without pain. And for the first time, Luna felt it clearly. This wasn't about safety. This wasn't about rules. This was about who was allowed to be trusted without proving it. The system didn't need to shout to control people. It only needed one word: non-compliant. Once that label appeared, everything else followed. Delay, isolation, punishment. Rachel stayed quiet, not because she agreed, but because she was protecting her children the only way she had been taught to, by cooperating. Luna stayed quiet too, but for a different reason. She was watching. The magnetic door slid shut with a soft click. Not loud, not dramatic, just final. The biomedical case disappeared behind frosted glass, and a small red line of light traced across the doorframe, confirming the lock. On the screen above the waiting area, one line of text appeared. Status: pending security clearance. Rachel stared at it like it was a sentence being passed. Not guilty, not innocent, just waiting. Maya shifted in her chair. At first it was subtle, a small roll of her shoulders, a quiet adjustment of her breathing, the kind of movements people make when they're trying not to worry the ones who love them. Then her fingers went pale. Her lips lost color. "Mom," she whispered. Rachel knelt immediately. "I'm here. I'm right here." Maya's breath came shorter now, not panicked yet, but strained, like air was becoming thicker around her. Rachel pressed the emergency call button beside the chair. A tone sounded. Then a calm digital voice answered, "Please wait. Your request has been logged." She pressed it again. "Please wait. Your request has been logged." Again. "Please wait." The words didn't change. The tone didn't change. But Maya did. Her hands were cold. Her eyes struggled to stay focused. Rachel reached for her, rubbing her arms, whispering reassurance she barely believed herself. "It's okay. They're checking. It's okay." But the screen still said pending. Luna stood frozen, watching the door that had swallowed the case. That door wasn't just glass and steel. It was distance. It was permission. It was everything between her sister and the thing keeping her alive. Across the room, Diane Brooks stood by the coffee station, stirring a cup slowly, speaking quietly to another staff member. She nodded once, smiled faintly, as if nothing urgent existed, as if no one was slipping. Luna stared at her, not with anger, with confusion. How could someone say, "We're checking," and then stand so still? How could urgency live in one corner of a room and not touch the other? Rachel raised her voice just slightly. "Excuse me, my daughter needs assistance." No response. She pressed the button again. "Please wait." The calm of the system felt cruel now.
Maya's breathing became uneven. She lifted a trembling hand to her chest. "I can't. It feels tight," she said. Rachel's voice cracked. "We need help now." People nearby began to notice. A man lowered his phone. A woman looked up from her tablet. But no one moved. Because in places like this, movement meant involvement. And involvement meant trouble. Luna took a step forward, then stopped.
She wasn't allowed there. She knew that. Everything about the building said so. But she also knew something else. Waiting was becoming dangerous. The screen flickered. A small orange symbol appeared beside the text. Warning, temperature instability detected. Rachel's heart dropped. "That means it's getting warm," she said aloud. "That means the system is failing." She looked toward Diane. "Please, the device is time-sensitive. It can't be delayed." Diane lifted her cup, took a sip, and replied without turning. "It's being processed." Processed. Like paperwork, like luggage, like something that didn't have a pulse attached to it. Maya leaned forward, her breath shallow now. Rachel held her tightly, one hand on her back, the other hovering uselessly in the air. She pressed the button again. "Please, wait." Luna's hands curled into fists. She glanced at the screen. The orange light pulsed. Out of range. Out of time. Daniel Reed, sitting a few seats away, lowered his newspaper slowly. He had seen this before. Not in hospitals, in offices, in checkpoints, in military supply rooms where procedure came before people. The quiet kind of injustice. The kind that didn't need shouting, only patience. His eyes moved from Maya's pale face to the locked door, to Diane's calm posture, and back again. He knew exactly what was happening. Rachel raised her voice now, not shouting, but breaking. "My daughter needs that case back. Now!" The room felt heavier. Still, no one intervened. Because when authority looks calm, urgency looks like panic. And panic is easy to dismiss. The screen beeped again. Status, out of range. Rachel gasped. That phrase didn't mean much to anyone else. To her, it meant countdown. It meant the system could trigger its safety lock, which wasn't safety at all. It was delay. And delay, for Maya, meant danger. Luna whispered, "Mom." Rachel didn't answer. She was already moving toward the door. Diane turned sharply. "Ma'am, you can't go in there." "My child is failing," Rachel said. "Your system is hurting her." Diane raised her hand, not threatening, just firm. "This is a restricted area. Then get someone who can override it. We are following protocol." Protocol. That word again. A shield, a wall, a reason not to feel. Maya slumped slightly in her chair. Rachel cried out, "Please!" Diane looked at her like someone studying a rulebook, not a mother. "We are doing our job." Samuel stood slowly, not stepping forward, not interfering, just standing, a witness. The screen flashed again. Critical threshold approaching. Luna stared at the words. They didn't look dangerous, but she knew better now. This was the moment where silence started to kill. Not loudly, not violently, politely, with a checklist, with procedures, with waiting. Maya squeezed Rachel's hand weakly. "Don't let them. Lock it," she whispered. Rachel turned to Diane, desperation replacing politeness. "Please, she's not paperwork. She's my daughter." Diane's voice stayed level. "Ma'am, you need to calm down." Calm. That word was always used when someone else was drowning. Luna looked from her sister to the locked door to Diane's unmoved face. She understood something then. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed, and it didn't care who paid the price. Luna stayed in her seat for a long second after the screen turned orange again. Her feet didn't move right away. Her hands didn't shake either. She just watched the number blink, then watched her sister's chest rise slower than it had a minute ago. And in that moment, something inside her shifted. Not fear, not panic, clarity. Because when you're 9 years old and someone you love is slipping away, there's a point where being polite becomes less important than being present. She stood up, not suddenly, not dramatically. Just the quiet way a child stands when they've already decided they're not asking for permission anymore. Rachel didn't notice at first. She was still pressing the assistance button, still saying, "Excuse me, please, we need help," into a system that answered her with the same flat voice every time. "Please wait. Your request is being processed." Processed. Like Maya was a form, like her breathing was a ticket number. Luna stepped past her mother and walked toward the restricted area. The space everyone else had been careful not to cross. The invisible line that said, "This is where your authority ends." People noticed. They always notice when a child walks where adults are afraid to go. Diane was still standing by the inspection table, still calm, still unbothered. A coffee cup in one hand, a clipboard in the other, looking like time was on her side. Luna stopped 3 feet in front of her. Her voice was soft, but it didn't wobble. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said.
"Can we please have the case back? My sister's numbers are dropping." It wasn't a demand. It wasn't a threat. It was the most dangerous thing in that room. It was the truth. Diane didn't even look at the screen. She didn't look at Maya. She looked down at Luna the way adults look at interruptions. "This isn't your concern," she said flatly. "Go back to your seat." Luna didn't move. "It is my concern," she said. "That's my sister." Diane exhaled through her nose, like she was dealing with something tedious. "Procedure is procedure," she replied. "You don't get special treatment because you're emotional." Emotional. That word always lands heavier on people who are trying not to cry. Luna turned her head just enough to see the screen again. The orange was brighter now, the numbers tighter together. A warning she didn't need explained. She took one step closer. "Please," she said. "If it locks, she won't be able to breathe." That was when Diane's tone sharpened. "I said, go back."
This is not your problem to solve. And that was the moment Luna understood something most adults never do. If she waited for permission, Maya might not make it. So she stopped waiting. Her hand reached out, fast, clean. She grabbed the handle of the biomedical case and pulled it toward her. Not violently, not recklessly, with the kind of grip that said, "I know exactly what this means." The room inhaled. Diane shouted, "Security!" Phones came up immediately. 1, 2, 5, 10. The quiet kind of chaos that happens when people realize something real is unfolding in front of them. Luna hugged the case to her chest, not like a thief, like a sister. Someone yelled, "She's trying to save her!" Another voice said, "Don't touch her!" Someone else whispered, "This is insane!" And suddenly, this wasn't a private interaction anymore. It was a public moment. Diane stepped forward. "Put that down right now." Luna didn't answer. She looked back at her mother.
Rachel had frozen.
torn between fear and pride and terror and disbelief, between wanting to pull her child back and knowing her child was doing what she couldn't. That kind of moment splits a parent in half. Emily rushed toward Rachel, her hands already moving. Okay, she said quietly. Listen to me. If it unlocks, even briefly, you reconnect here first, then stabilize. Don't panic. Her voice was shaking, but she was trying. Because sometimes bravery looks like helping anyway, even when you're scared of losing your job. Security was moving closer now. That's when Samuel stood up, slowly, deliberately. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't touch anyone. He just stepped into the space between Luna and the approaching guards. Not blocking them, claiming the space. I'm a witness, he said, and I'm not moving. The guards hesitated, just half a second. But half a second is sometimes everything. And in that half second, the room shifted, because this was no longer a child acting alone. This was a moment with eyes on it, with phones recording, with people choosing sides. And that's when the truth becomes harder to bury, because crowds don't create justice, but they create pressure. And pressure is what forces justice to show up. Rachel followed Emily's instructions with shaking hands. She pressed the small release tab, turned the valve the way she was shown, and waited. For a second, nothing happened. Then the faintest sound came through the device. A soft, uneven breath. Maya's chest lifted just a little. Not strong, not steady, but real. Rachel leaned forward like she was afraid the moment might disappear if she breathed too hard. "Come on, baby," she whispered. "Stay with me." Maya's fingers twitched. The gray in her skin softened. It wasn't a miracle. It wasn't a full recovery. But it was life returning inch by inch, stubborn and fragile. For the first time in what felt like hours, the room exhaled. Not loudly, not with cheers, just a quiet release of tension that had been holding everyone hostage. Rachel pressed her forehead against Maya's and closed her eyes. Luna stood close, her small hand resting on her sister's arm, like a promise she was keeping. Emily backed away slowly, her own breath shaky. And in that moment, it felt like the worst part was over, like the danger had passed, like compassion had finally won. But systems don't like being proven wrong, and people who hide behind them don't like losing control. Diane's face hardened. The softness she had worn before vanished like a mask being dropped. She didn't look at Maya. She didn't ask if she was okay. She didn't acknowledge that a child had just been pulled back from the edge. Instead, she turned and raised her voice. "I need internal security in the medical wing. Now." Her words were sharp, rehearsed, confident. "We have a breach of protocol. Unauthorized access to restricted equipment. Possible endangerment of facility safety." Just like that, the story changed. It wasn't about a girl who almost died. It was about rules that had been broken. Rachel looked up, confused at first. "What are you talking about?" she asked. "You saw what happened. My daughter couldn't breathe." Diane didn't meet her eyes. "Ma'am, you and your family interfered with a secured process. You removed equipment without clearance. That is a serious violation." Her tone was calm, but her words landed like a threat. "You need to remain where you are." Luna tightened her grip on Rachel's sleeve. Emily took a step forward, then stopped herself. Samuel straightened in his seat, already sensing where this was going. The room shifted again, not toward relief, but toward something colder,
something official. An announcement echoed through the space. Attention! All parties involved in the security incident must remain in their current positions until further instructions are given. The words were neutral, mechanical, but everyone knew what they meant. Don't move. Don't speak. Don't defend yourself. Rachel pulled both girls into her arms, not because she thought they were guilty, but because she knew how fast innocence could be rewritten. Her heart was still pounding from fear of losing Maya, and now it was pounding from something else. The fear of being punished for surviving. This is the moment people rarely talk about. When danger passes, but justice does not arrive. When relief is replaced by accusation. When a system decides that saving a life was inconvenient. Rules are supposed to protect people. That's the story we're told. They exist to keep order, to prevent chaos, to ensure fairness. But when rules are used without compassion, without context, without conscience, they stop being shields. They become blades. Quiet ones, clean ones. The kind that don't draw blood immediately, but cut deep all the same. Because when policy becomes more important than humanity, it stops being law. It becomes a weapon. And weapons don't need anger. They only need permission. You could see it in Diane's posture, in how straight she stood, in how certain she was that paperwork would now do the rest of her work for her. She didn't have to argue. She didn't have to justify herself. The system would speak for her. Protocol would become her shield. And the family in front of her would become a case number, not people. This is how harm gets legalized. Not with shouting, not with cruelty, but with procedure. People like to believe that following rules automatically makes them good. That as long as they obey instructions, they are absolved from responsibility. But hiding behind regulations is one of the oldest ways humans have avoided facing their own conscience. It allows someone to say, "I didn't choose this, the system did." As if the system exists without human hands guiding it. As if rules write themselves. As if silence is not a decision. Diane wasn't protecting safety. She was protecting authority, and authority hates being challenged by truth. Because the truth was simple. A girl was saved, and instead of being honored, that act was being criminalized. Security personnel began moving in from the far end of the room, not running, walking, calm, professional. That calm was more terrifying than anger. It meant everything was being treated as normal. That a family on the brink of trauma was just another procedural event. Rachel felt her throat tighten. "We didn't do anything wrong," she said, more to herself than to anyone else. "We just didn't let her die." But systems don't measure morality. They measure compliance. And compliance doesn't care if you are right. This is why rules must always be questioned in the presence of suffering. Because the moment a rule protects itself instead of a human life, it has already failed. And the moment someone enforces it without reflection, they have stepped away from justice. Justice is not blind obedience. Justice is informed courage. Luna looked up at Diane then, not with fear, with something clearer, something older than fear, understanding. She didn't speak. She didn't argue. She just watched. And in her silence was a question no form could answer. If saving my sister is wrong, what kind of right are you protecting? The room was full of witnesses now. Phones were still raised, eyes were alert. Samuel stood quietly, his presence solid, steady. Emily hovered close, torn between duty and decency. And Diane stood at the center, confident that policy would shield her from consequence. But here is the danger of hiding behind rules. The moment witnesses appear, the shield becomes thinner. The moment truth is seen, procedure becomes fragile. Because people know the difference between protection and punishment, between safety and control, between law and cruelty dressed as order. Rachel pressed her cheek against Maya's hair and whispered, "You're okay. You're here. That's what matters."
But her voice shook because she also knew something else. Survival had not ended their fight. It had just changed its shape. The threat was no longer physical. It was institutional. And institutional threats don't rush. They wait. They gather authority. They prepare paperwork. This is how families become defendants, not because they harmed anyone, but because they disrupted a narrative, because they forced a system to reveal what it valued more. And what it valued was not life. It valued control. As security drew closer, the question hung heavy in the air, not spoken, but felt by everyone watching. Who is being protected right now? And who is being punished for refusing to disappear quietly? Rules deserve respect only when they protect people. The moment they shield prejudice, ego, or power, they must be challenged. Not with chaos, not with violence, but with witnesses, with truth, with courage that refuses to be polite in the face of injustice.
Rachel held her daughters tighter, not because she believed they were wrong, but because she knew the system was about to pretend they were.
Luna tugged lightly on Rachel's sleeve, not in panic, not in fear, but in that quiet way that meant she had already made up her mind. "Mom," she whispered, leaning close so only Rachel could hear. "Can I borrow your card?" Rachel froze, not because she didn't understand what Luna meant, but because she understood too well. Her hand went instinctively to the pocket where the biometric ID card was always kept. The one thing she never let out of her control. The one thing that could reach places her voice couldn't. "You don't even know what that is," Rachel said softly, though her tone lacked conviction. Luna looked up at her, calm in a way that felt unsettling. "I do," she replied. "It's the card with the silver edge, the one you hide behind your insurance papers, the one that has the emergency number on the back." Rachel's breath caught.
"How would you know that? I saw it once," Luna said. "In the drawer, when you were looking for Maya's prescriptions." Rachel felt a rush of cold move through her. That card wasn't just identification. It was connection. It was leverage. It was the last thread to a world she had tried to keep separate from her children. A world of power and influence that had never shown up when she needed it most. "You're too young for this," Rachel whispered. Luna shook her head. Maya is not too young to need help. That was when Rachel realized this wasn't a request. It was a decision. And for the first time, she saw that her daughter wasn't asking permission. She was asking trust. Rachel hesitated, then slowly pulled the card from her pocket. Luna's eyes never left it. Not with excitement, not with curiosity, with purpose. Rachel placed it gently into Luna's hand, as if she were handing over something sacred. "Be careful," she said. "I will," Luna replied. "I promise." She stepped away quietly, slipping into a corner where the noise of the room softened. Her fingers were small against the surface of the card, but steady. She flipped it over and found the number printed beneath the encrypted seal. A number Rachel had memorized and never once used. Because using it meant admitting how alone she had been all those years. Luna pressed the call button. The line rang once, then twice. Then a voice answered, low,
controlled. This is Ethan. Luna didn't waste words. She didn't introduce herself. She didn't explain emotions. She spoke like someone who knew time was heavier than fear. "My sister Maya is in danger," she said. "They locked her medical device. They used the wrong protocol, and they turned off the cameras in the storage area." There was silence on the other end. Not disbelief, not confusion, recognition. Luna continued. "My mom is Rachel Carter. We are at Mojave Medical Hub. Please come."
Another pause. Then, "Are you safe right now?" "No," Luna said, "but we are not wrong." Ethan closed his eyes. He hadn't heard Rachel's voice in years. He hadn't expected to hear anything connected to her again. And yet here it was, carried by the voice of a child who sounded like she had inherited courage without being taught it. "I'm on my way," he said. Luna ended the call and returned the card to Rachel without ceremony. "He's coming," she said. Nothing more. Rachel stared at her, stunned. "Who did you call?" "The man who sends money but never shows up," Luna replied quietly. "The man whose name you never say." Rachel felt her chest tighten. "You shouldn't have done that." Luna looked at Maya, then back at her mother. "You shouldn't have had to hide it." That was the moment the story shifted. Not because power had entered the room, but because accountability had been invited. Ethan didn't hesitate. He grabbed his coat, his keys, his phone. The world he had built on distance and delegation suddenly felt hollow. Money had solved problems. Silence had avoided conflict. But now, a child had called him with clarity that stripped away every excuse. This was not something to be managed. This was something to be faced. Back in the medical hub, Luna returned to Maya's side and sat down, folding her legs beneath her. She didn't look proud. She didn't look relieved. She looked resolved. Rachel knelt beside them, brushing Maya's hair, her heart pounding with questions she was afraid to ask. The room hadn't noticed what had just happened. No one announced it. No alarms went off. But the balance had shifted. A line had been drawn that wasn't visible yet, only inevitable. This is the kind of courage that never makes speeches, the kind that doesn't announce itself, the kind that simply acts quietly, without asking if it's allowed. Luna didn't need to understand power. She understood responsibility. Children don't wait for permission to protect what they love. They move before fear teaches them hesitation. They speak before the world teaches them silence. And that's why their courage is so dangerous to systems built on control. It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't compromise. It simply tells the truth. Rachel watched her daughter and realized something painful and beautiful at the same time. She had spent years trying to shield Luna from harsh realities, from abandonment, from disappointment, from complicated adult truths. But Luna had learned anyway, not from lectures, from absence, from watching, from surviving in a world that rarely showed up gently. That phone call was not rebellion. It was inheritance. It was the inheritance of responsibility that comes when no one else steps forward. Luna leaned close to Maya and whispered, "I'm here." Just that. Not promises, not guarantees. Presence. This is what children need. Not speeches about dignity, not lessons about patience. They need one adult who chooses them, who shows up, who stands where the world would rather look away. Ethan was already on the road, not because he wanted redemption, but because he finally understood what failure had cost. Luna had done her part, not loudly,
Not bravely in the way movies show, but bravely in the way that actually changes outcomes, by calling truth into a space that had been protected by silence. And as she sat beside her sister, steady and unyielding, the room unknowingly prepared itself for the arrival of something it could not control. Accountability. The security team moved in like they had done this 1,000 times before, calm, practiced, already assuming who was right and who was wrong. One officer scanned the room, another rested a hand near his belt, and a third started asking for names before anyone had even finished speaking. This wasn't a rescue, it was a cleanup. And Diane stood at the center of it, like a director calling the next scene.
"There," she said, pointing straight at Rachel. "That's the woman, and the child. They interfered with medical protocol. They accessed a restricted area. They compromised the safety of this entire facility."
Her voice was steady, confident. The kind of confidence that comes from believing the system will always choose you. Rachel pulled Luna and Maya closer to her, her arms wrapping around them instinctively. She didn't argue. She didn't shout. She just held them, because she had learned that in moments like this, anything you said could be turned into proof of guilt. The lead officer nodded slowly. "Ma'am, we're going to need everyone to stay exactly where they are." That was when the doors opened again, not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet, deliberate motion that made several people turn their heads at the same time. And the moment they did, the temperature in the room shifted. Ethan Cole stepped inside. He wasn't alone.
A woman in a navy suit followed him, holding a slim legal folder. Behind her, a man with a badge from internal compliance scanned the room with sharp, professional eyes. No uniforms, no raised voices, just presence. Ethan didn't rush. He walked forward with a calm that didn't ask permission. He stopped between the security team and Rachel, just far enough to command attention without escalating tension. "Let's pause everything," he said evenly. "Right now." The room fell quiet, not because he was loud, but because authority recognizes authority. Diane turned, her expression tightening for the first time. "And you are?" Ethan met her gaze. "Someone who has been reviewing your system logs for the past 12 minutes. That was the moment the certainty drained from her face. "This is an active security situation," she replied quickly. "You're interfering." "No," Ethan said calmly. "You already did that." He nodded to the man beside him. "Please display the camera logs from the medical storage area. The full sequence, including manual overrides." The compliance officer opened a tablet and mirrored it onto the nearby monitor. The screen flickered, then stabilized. A timeline appeared. Timestamps, access logs, system interruptions. "This camera," Ethan continued, "was manually disabled at 14:27, 40 seconds before the device status was marked under review. That's not protocol. That's tampering." Diane took a step back. "That's impossible. The system auto-adjusts during inspections." The compliance officer spoke. "Auto-adjustments don't require a biometric override. This one did." Silence spread through the room. Not dramatic silence, the heavy kind. The kind that tells you something irreversible just happened. "And this," Ethan added, "is the moment the child's medical device entered critical range. Which means the delay wasn't accidental. It was created." Diane's voice sharpened. "You're making assumptions." "No," he replied. "We're reading records." People began raising their phones again, but this time not to capture chaos, to capture truth. One of the officers glanced at the screen.
Ma'am, we're going to need clarification on these entries. Diane looked around, searching for control, but finding witnesses instead. That was when Samuel stepped forward. He didn't rush. He didn't interrupt. He simply raised his voice enough to be heard. I was here, he said, from the moment they took that case. I saw her standing there drinking coffee while that child's condition got worse. I heard her say it wasn't their problem. Everyone turned. My name is Samuel Reed, he continued, retired Army, and I know what abuse of authority looks like when it wears polite clothes. No one argued. The security lead shifted his stance. Ms. Brooks, I need you to step aside. Diane hesitated. Just a second. But it was enough. No, she snapped. They violated protocol. And you violated trust, Ethan replied.
And now you'll answer for it. The compliance officer spoke again. We're placing you under temporary hold pending investigation for medical interference, security system manipulation, and potential discrimination. Diane's face drained of color. This is outrageous. No, Samuel said quietly. This is overdue. Two officers approached her now, gently, firmly, the way the system should always work. As they escorted her aside, Rachel exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. Luna squeezed her hand. Maya's breathing stayed steady. The room had chosen, not with anger, not with shouting, but with evidence. This is how justice actually moves, slowly, relentlessly, without spectacle. It doesn't need rage. It needs truth that cannot be ignored. And for once, the truth had witnesses. Maya was moved first, quietly, carefully, with a level of urgency that finally matched how serious her condition had always been. The medical team didn't waste time explaining. They didn't make speeches. They just acted. And for Rachel, that was the moment her body finally gave up trying to be strong. She watched them wheel Maya through the doors, and her knees buckled like the weight of the last few hours had suddenly been allowed to land. Not because she was weak, but because she was finally safe enough to stop holding herself together. A nurse caught her before she hit the floor, not with pity, not with dramatic comfort, just steady hands and a simple sentence. You did everything right. And Rachel cried. Not loud, not pretty. Just the kind of crying that happens when you've been surviving too long without permission to rest. Luna stood beside her, small hands clenched, eyes still watching the hallway where Maya disappeared. She didn't cry. Not yet. She was still in the part where bravery hadn't worn off. Ethan waited until things were quiet, until no one was looking at him like a savior, because he wasn't trying to be one. He walked toward Luna slowly, like someone approaching something fragile, something sacred. She looked up at him, not with anger, not with hope, just with a calm that felt older than 9. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Because how do you explain absence to a child who learned courage without you? And that's when the unsent letter existed. Not on paper, not in words, but in the space between them. The letter that says, I should have been here. The letter that admits, money can support, but presence is what protects. The letter that confesses, I thought I could love you from a distance, and I was wrong. He didn't write it. He lived it. By showing up now. By staying. Sometimes accountability doesn't arrive as punishment. Sometimes it arrives as responsibility.
Now let me ask you something. What would you have done in that room? Not in theory, not in the comments section, but in that exact moment, when a child is being treated like a disruption. When a parent is being treated like a problem. When rules are being used as walls instead of bridges. Because moments like this happen more than we want to admit. In hospitals, at airports, in schools, at offices, in government buildings, in any place where power hides behind procedure. So here are 3 things you can do, not as a hero, but as a witness who refuses to disappear. First, name what you see, not emotionally, factually. This child needs help. This person is being denied care. This delay is causing harm. Power thrives in confusion. Truth survives in clarity. Second, call the right authority, not the loudest one, the accountable one. Ask for supervisors. Ask for documentation. Ask for records. Systems fear paper trails more than anger. Third, refuse isolation, because injustice works best when victims feel alone. Stand close. Stay present. Let them know someone is watching. That's not interference. That's protection.
Now let me give you something even stronger. Something simple. Something powerful. 4 keys to breaking an invisible prison. 1. Evidence. Screenshots, videos, logs, timelines. 2. Witnesses. Not crowds. Credible presence. 3. Authority. Not power. Responsibility. And 4. Consequence. Without it, truth becomes trivia. This is how real justice forms, not through rage, through structure. Now ask yourself, if you were there, where would you stand? Beside the family or behind the rules? Because rules don't have a heart, people do. And people decide whether rules protect or harm. Drop a comment, not to argue, to share. Have you ever been made to feel like you didn't belong in a space that claimed to serve you? Tag someone who needs to hear this, not because they're weak, but because courage grows faster when it's seen. You don't need to be a hero. You just need to be a witness who stays.